Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice. I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And coming out of Synod 2024, things continue to be messy. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. We also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast so that the algorithms put out our content further into the world. You are our marketing plan, and we believe we've placed our marketing in good hands. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is a modified version of a talk I gave earlier in the year at the Messy Reformation Conference. Well, I wanted to kick off this episode by talking a little bit about the start of the Messy Reformation. I've mentioned this over the years a number of times that I had a mentor who convinced me to stay in the Christian Reformed Church and fight for Reformation. I was really tempted to leave the Christian Reformed Church and go, be ordained in the PCA or some denomination like that when I was going to seminary. And my mentor said, "No, I want you to stay and fight." But here I am, some nobody from rural Minnesota. How in the world was I even going to get in the game? I had no idea how I was going to get in the game for Reformation, but what I did, because I felt this call from God, I just started reading and studying to prepare for the fight for Reformation. So I've mentioned a number of times I've read and studied the conservative resurgence and the Southern Baptist Convention. I've been fairly obsessed with the Reformation and Martin Luther and John Calvin and all the other guys involved in that. And I was watching synod live streams and reading church order and reading synodical procedure so that I had a familiarity with the way things worked, not even knowing if I would ever end up at synod or how I would be involved in all of this. I've mentioned I went to Calvin Seminary, not because I thought I would get a world-class education there, but I went so that I could be well connected in the Christian Reformed Church and have more opportunity to get involved in the fight for Reformation. And it's interesting, I did all of that stuff with no idea if I would ever actually end up in the fight. But I just kept feeling this strong tug and pull from God that maybe I would be in the fight, but at least he was calling me to walk in this direction. And in the Christian Reformed Church, we felt this pressure building up, leading up to the human sexuality report. And I remember just having this feeling that it was going to be kind of a make or break moment for the denomination. And I knew, I felt like I had to do something. I had no idea what to do. And I remember just taking a lot of time to kind of walk and pray and brainstorm about what I could possibly do. And as I was praying and thinking and brainstorming what I should do, I remember talking to some of the guys who were involved in the women in office battles back in the 90s. And some of them said, one of the reasons we lost was that the conservatives quit. I don't think that's quite right, but that's what I was told anyways. And I wanted to make sure that didn't happen this time, or at least do what I could to try to keep the conservatives in the battle. And I knew that I really enjoyed having conversations with other pastors about life and ministry and denominational stuff. And And every time I would sit down with another pastor and talk to them about life and ministry and what's going on in the denomination, I always walked away from it thinking, man, I think other people would benefit from this conversation. I think the church would be blessed by this conversation. And so the idea for a podcast came to my mind, this place where I could interview conservative pastors, give them a platform, talk about what's going on in the denomination, encourage those who felt like they were a voice in the wilderness, and kind of help enroll people to get involved in the fight. Or, what other people have called, maybe to help some people would call it a grassroots movement, or other people have called it maybe a pitchfork rebellion. But just try to get people involved in this fight for Reformation in the Christian Reformed Church. And I think it's important to just know, this thing almost didn't happen. I had no idea what I was doing. I've never done podcasts before. I've been listening to podcasts before even podcasts were a thing, really. For decades now, I've been downloading talks and stuff and listening to them. But I remember leading up to it, having this idea and almost quitting and saying, why would anybody listen? Because, I'm some nobody. And yet God wouldn't let me go, wouldn't let this idea go. And so I decided, well, I'll be faithful and we'll try it out. We'll try it out for 3 months. And if nobody's listening after 3 months, we'll cut it, kill it, move on, and try something different. And by God's grace, he's blessed this little effort. And it's not because of me or Willie, because we're anything special or big. It's because we have so many great, faithful pastors in the Christian Reformed Church, and they have so many good things to say, and people want to hear what they have to say. And so God's blessed it, and it's been kind of fun. And some people have maybe asked where we've got this name, the Messy Reformation, and I don't even remember the talk I was listening to, but I was listening to somebody talk about the Reformation, and I wish I remembered who it was or the lecture so I could send you there. I don't even remember if it was a good lecture, but I remember them using the phrase Messy Reformation in the lecture. And I remember the moment I heard that phrase, I knew that's what we had to call this podcast. Because I was reminded that I thought this was a necessary reminder for all the conservatives throughout the Christian Reformed Church that reformations are always messy. Things are never as neat and tidy as we would like them. It often feels like it's a disaster. And I know even in my own heart that the messiness of things is what often gets me so frustrated and makes me want to quit. And so I wanted to start something that would help kind of keep this reminder in front of us on a regular basis that as we fight this fight, we need to keep persevering. We don't quit, even though things get messy, because this is the way reformations work. And I need to keep reminding myself and reminding all the conservatives of that on a weekly basis. And it's interesting, even though I keep reminding everybody about this, I recognize this tendency still in myself for some reason. Even as one of the hosts of the Messy Reformation, I still don't like things to be messy. I want everything to be neat and tidy. I want it to be clean and easy. I want Reformation to just kind of happen quick and smoothly. I want my church revitalization project that I'm a part of, I want that to be clean and easy and tidy. And often when I find myself getting so frustrated about the denomination or frustrated even with my own church, it's because I've fallen into this trap of expecting things to be easy and clean and tidy. But why would we ever expect it to be that way? Look back over church history and ask, what would ever make you think that shepherding a congregation or a denomination would be easy? Look back through God's word. What would ever make us think that shepherding a church or a denomination would be easy? Here are some examples from God's word from some of the leaders of God's people throughout history. Here's Moses from Numbers 11, verses 11 through 15. Moses says, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive of all this people? Did I give them birth that you say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give to their fathers? Where am I to get meat and give all these people? They weep before me and they say, give us meat that we may eat. I'm not able to carry all these people alone. The burden's too heavy for me. If you would treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight that I may not see my wretchedness." Right? This is Moses speaking about God's people saying, why are you treating me like this? Why have you given me these people? I didn't give birth to them. They're your people. All they do is complain and complain and complain, and they ask me to do things, and I have no idea how I'm going to provide for them or how I'm going to care for them. This is such a mess. I have no idea what to do. Right? Moses says, I didn't give birth to these people. You gave birth to these people. You take care of them. Right? Ever been there? I sure have. What about this word from God to Jeremiah? Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 7 through 8, and then 16 through 19. God says to Jeremiah, do not say I'm only a youth. For to all to whom I send you, you shall go. And whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. I will declare my judgments against them for all their evil in forsaking me. They have made offerings to other gods and worshiped the work of their own hands. But you, dress yourself for work. Arise and say to them everything I command you. Do not be dismayed by them, lest I dismay you before them. And behold, I make you this day a fortified city, an iron pillar and bronze walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, and the people of the land. They will fight against you, but they shall not prevail against you, for I am with you, declares the Lord, to deliver you. So that's Jeremiah's call to ministry. Hey, you go where I tell you to go, you do what I tell you to do, and you say what I tell you to say. And the people that you're going to be shepherding as a prophet, they're not only not going to listen to anything you say, but they will continue to fight against you the entire time. So they will actively be fighting against you, not even just ignoring you. But don't worry about it. I'll give you what you need. I'll strengthen you. You just do what I tell you to do. Go where I tell you to go. Say what I tell you to say. But they won't listen, and they will fight against you every single step of the way. Why would we think this would be easy? How about the Apostle Paul? 2 Corinthians 11, 23 through 30. Are they servants of Christ? I'm a better one. I'm talking like a madman with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hand of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers. You hear that? Danger. In toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure, and apart from other things, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I'm not weak? Who is made to fall and I'm not indignant? If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. Why do we think it's going to be easy? It's never easy. It's always messy. It's always hard. And the messiness of there's a lot of reasons why there's messiness. Part of that messiness is the fact that Reformation always requires a lot of hard work on our part. Of course, God is the one who does the work. But again, we have this tension, right? From Philippians 2. Work out your salvation in fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work according to his good pleasure, right? Do the hard work because God is at work. Reformation is hard work. Shepherding a congregation is hard work. Raising a family is hard work, and it's messy. It requires sacrifice. It requires conviction. It requires more than just coming up with an idea and then telling people about it as well. I think this is a really important thing for us to understand in this, and I realize Steve Jobs is not a great guy or whatever, but I thought this quote I heard from him a while back is a helpful reminder, especially for all of us in the midst of Reformation. Here's what he said: what happened to Apple after he had been away for a year. Or for a few years. He says this: one of the things that really hurt Apple was after I left, John Scully got a very serious disease. That disease, I've seen other people get it too, is the disease of thinking that a really great idea is 90% of the work. And then if you just tell all these other people, here's the great idea, then it will happen. The problem with that is there's just a tremendous amount of craftsmanship in between a great idea and a great product. As you evolve that great idea, it changes, it grows. It never comes out like it starts because you learn a lot more as you get into the subtleties of it. You also find there's tremendous trade-offs that you have to make. There are just certain things you can't make electrons do. Certain things you can't make plastic do, or glass do, or factories do, or robots do. As you get into all these things, designing a product is keeping 5,000 things in your brain, these concepts, and fitting them all together and continuing to push to fit them together in new and different ways to get what you want. Every day you discover something new that's a new problem or a new opportunity to fit these things together a little differently. And he says it's that process that's the magic. I think that's a really important reminder for us in the midst of Reformation, in the midst of a messy Reformation, that a good idea is not enough. That you have to have the good idea, and then it's the messy work of figuring out how to make that idea work and how to bring that idea into reality that is beautiful, really. It's that hard work of kind of pounding away day after day, sermon after sermon, council meeting after council meeting, synod after synod, so that the great ideas actually become a reality in our church and in our denomination. And that's what's actually beautiful, when these things, through our hard work and through God's providential care, when those things become a reality. But that process is not only hard, it's messy. And it requires courage to keep moving forward, to keep pushing forward. And the reality is, we know these things to be true in many aspects of our life. I think about Reformation a lot. I would say I think about Reformation multiple times a day. there was the random thing going around, like, how often does your husband or your boyfriend think about the Roman Empire? You could ask me, how often do I think about the Reformation? And it would be like multiple times a day. Not because I'm so focused on reformation of a denomination. I believe Reformation applies to many aspects of our lives. I believe church revitalization is a work of reformation on a local level. And even more locally than that, you've probably heard me say this before. I believe that the process of sanctification in our lives is a work of reformation. We're told from Colossians 3 that we are being renewed into the image of God. We are being reformed into the image of God. And so what's going on in us is a reformation, a transformation into the image of God. But you could also flip that around, and this is where I think it's really helpful for us to understand that not only is sanctification the work of reformation in someone's life, I think when we think about reformation in a church or reformation in a denomination, that we need to think about it as being the work of sanctification being carried out on a broader scale, not just in a person's life, but that work of sanctification being carried out on many people's lives as they interact with one another in the church, but also in a denomination. And here's why that's so helpful. We know that sanctification is a very messy process, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of energy, right? A good idea about how to change your life and to become more like Jesus is not enough. Right? A good idea doesn't work. Like John Owen has told us, right? We need to be killing sin, or sin will be killing us. Or as Paul wrote in Philippians, we need to be working out our salvation in fear and trembling. And so we know, when we look at your own life and think about this process of sanctification in your own life, you know that it's hard, gritty, messy work that takes a very, very, very long time. I really like Eugene Peterson's analogy of a long obedience in the same direction. I like to apply that to sanctification because that's what it is. It's a long obedience in the same direction, continually killing the sin that comes into our lives. There's this line from a KB song, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but he says, his sins are mimicking Jesus. He buries his sin, and in 3 days they're back up again. Right? This idea that our sin, every time we think we've conquered a sin, every time we think we've killed that sin and put it to death, it pops back out of the ground. We got to kill again, and it happens over and over and over again. So it's a long obedience in the same direction. It's a long battle in the same direction. And so many times the process of sanctification on our part is just simply putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes we end up taking a few steps back, but then we just kind of keep plodding forward over a long period of time to the point where our sins are slowly being killed and defeated through the power of the Holy Spirit in our life. And what you eventually get to this point, right, where you look back and you realize that what used to be some of your greatest struggles in your life, they're not your greatest struggles anymore. And there wasn't like a definitive moment when that changed. Sometimes there is. But many times it's just you've been slowly putting one foot in front of the other, trusting God, relying on the Spirit, killing your sin. And all of a sudden, 5-10 years down the road, you look back and you go, this is something I really struggled with. And yet it's not. I struggle with other things, but this one thing, God has conquered in my life through the power of the Holy Spirit. And it's this long, slow process in our lives. And we know this just from working with people in our congregations, whether you're a pastor or not, you're engaging in other people in your congregation, you're working with them. And we know that our own personal battles with sin and other people's battles with sin, they take a long time, and they're very, very messy, with seeming wins and then seeming defeats and up and down battles over a long period of time. Why would we think sanctification would be easy? The old man doesn't die easily or quickly. And here's why I found this to be so helpful as I think about the Reformation. It's this reminder for us, right? We are leading Reformation in our own lives. We're leading Reformation in our families. We're leading Reformation in our churches, in our classes, in our denomination. And as we're doing that, just simply plodding along is very effective. I was a youth pastor for a long time, and youth ministry wants to kind of flourish on these retreat moments. There's this tendency to think that if we can get people away, get them on a retreat, give them this mile-high moment, it's going to be a turning point in their life, and it's going to change them forever. That happens sometimes, but that's really just seeking for the quick and easy fix. Where for most of us, the transformation in our lives has been just simply plodding along, putting one foot in front of the other. And it's been funny that, some people eventually find out that I run quite a bit. And they ask me, like, are you a runner? And I kind of laugh and I say, I'm definitely not a runner, but I run. There's nothing about me. I'm a big football type player. I'm not your typical looking runner, but I do run a lot to stay healthy and to, try to be able to be fit to do what God has called me to do. And, when I first started running, I always started out too fast, and I would just be completely exhausted and worn out after a mile, and I would just quit because I couldn't go on. But what I eventually realized is if I just slowed down a little bit and just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, then I could go 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, right? Just plodding, slowing down, putting one foot in the other, making slow, steady progress is a highly effective strategy for reformation in your own lives, in your family, in your church, in your classes, in the denomination. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I also think it's important that we don't just plod around randomly without any direction, because that's also not effective. Effectiveness is not a long obedience in an unknown number of directions. Rather, effectiveness is long, plodding obedience in the same direction, which means we have to pick a direction, and we have to head in that direction slowly over time. And why that's significant is that means if we're going to pick a direction, we have to pick a direction that I like to say is both strategic and feasible. Right? It's no use pursuing something that isn't feasible, that you're never going to be able to accomplish. But it's also no use pursuing something that has no strategic value. But if you have something that you can accomplish, maybe it's a stretch, it's feasible, and it's strategic, then you know that it's worth plodding toward for a long time. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you know that as you get closer to that goal, it's going to make a difference. It's going to kind of move the needle in your life, in your family, your church, any of these different things. And here's why this is so important in all of these different realms that I'm talking about. Because we can't pick every battle at once, right? You know that. We sometimes like to try to do that, but we can't. In your own life, you have so many things going on and so many sins and temptations going on, and we need to try to fight all of those. But often there's one big one that's holding you back. You need to focus on that one and focus on killing that one, and then you can move on to the next one, right? You have to be strategic about which battles you fight. I mentioned this about Calvin before. Here's what Calvin said about Geneva when he came to that church. He said, quote, "When I first came to this church, I found almost nothing in it. There was no Reformation. Everything was in disorder." Unquote. Right? So when everything is in disorder, whether it's in your church or in your life or in a denomination, you can't fight every battle. You have to pick one. And if you're going to pick one battle, you want it to be the battle that's going to move the needle the most when it's accomplished. You want it to be the most strategic battle that you can fight. And then you go after that battle with what I've heard called on another podcast on church revitalization. They call it tactical patience. I like to call it digital perseverance. You pick that thing and you go after it. You keep heading in that direction. You keep putting one foot in front of the other over and over and over and over again until you finally arrive in that place. And then you pick the next place and you begin all over again. And you have to do that in your own life as you attack sin in your life. You have to do that in your family, in your church, your classes, your denomination as well. And in order to do that, in order to keep going in that long obedience in the same direction, you have to have diligent perseverance or tactical patience. And, here's how all this kind of ties together with the conference that we were doing earlier in the year with this theme of courageous leadership, right? If you are feeling this nudge to be a courageous leader in your own life, maybe in your own process of sanctification, or a courageous leader in your family or your church or your classes or your denomination, it's really hard to be courageous if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know where you're going, or you don't know what you're fighting for. You can't be courageous in that situation. And this may not surprise any of you to hear me say that courage requires clarity. Right? How can you be courageous if you don't know what you need to be courageous for? And even on top of that, it's important to know if you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're fighting for, every setback is a failure and every loss seems completely catastrophic. This is what we're experiencing in the Christian Reformed Church right now. We need to find a clear vision of where we're heading as a denomination, because then as we have this clear vision of where we're heading, all of these different setbacks and failures don't seem so catastrophic. They actually end up just seeming like, okay, this is just a bump in the road as we're heading in the direction that God is calling us. And so that's what happens when we have clarity about where we're going, why we're going there. What happens when we know that where we're going is both strategic and feasible. It takes all of these kind of setbacks and failures and turns them into detours. As we're okay, that wasn't quite right, so we're going to shift back on track, or we're going to keep heading in that direction, and that allows you to be courageous in the midst of setbacks and failures, not be defeated. You don't get lost in the messiness of this Reformation. And so that just makes me kind of come to the end of a little bit toward the end anyways, as I want to encourage you to start thinking about these things that are strategic and feasible in your own life. What sin is it in your own life right now, or what battle are you fighting in your own life that's strategic and feasible that you need to go after with this long obedience in the same direction, with this diligent perseverance? What is it that's going to help kind of move the needle in your own life to help you become conformed to the image of Christ? Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's devotions. Maybe it's some of those spiritual disciplines that are going to help you get there, or maybe it's a certain sin in your life you need to start fasting from, you need to start attacking, maybe you need an accountability partner. But then spread it out to your family. What is it in your family you need to start diligently pursuing and persevering in? What is it in your church? What is it in your classes? What is it in our denomination that we think is strategic and feasible? It's going to help move the needle into our denomination becoming a more effective and God-honoring denomination. I want to encourage you, spend time thinking about these things, and then and not just thinking about it, praying about it, that God and His Spirit would reveal these things to you, where He would have you go. And then ask Him to do like He did to Jeremiah, where He said, I know it's going to be hard, but I'm going to strengthen you. I'm going to give you a bronze forehead. I'm going to just help you keep persevering in this fight in the same direction. And because I've called you to this, and I'm going to move the needle in this. And so be courageous. Start moving in that direction. Keep following the leading of the Holy Spirit. Keep plodding along in this messy Reformation. That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way, you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly to your email inbox. It will also give us the opportunity to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and He bought it with His blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.